So thanks a million. It's been great hearing my colleagues, the other chairs, speaking already. I know there's a couple more to follow me, and I already see some of the points I want to make reflected in what everybody else has said. So in terms of my update from the Connell Teaching and Learning Committee, my priority is to speak the way ahead for teaching and learning initiatives across Irish libraries. And just to say, I've put my own Twitter handle at the bottom of the screen there, and also our own Connell T&L Twitter handle, which is Connell TL, if you'd like to follow that. So I just want to talk about the committee firstly, our current work programme then, and finish by just putting out a vision around teaching and learning and how I see it moving ahead potentially. So here's our rogues gallery. And I suppose, again, in common with some of the other speakers, I'm new to the position of chair of Connell Teaching and Learning. And I just for start want to, and luckily Niall has stayed on with us. Niall McSweeney was our previous chair and has done excellent work on behalf of the committee. And additionally, quite a number of our committee members are newly joined as well. And we've some committee members who have stepped down recently. So again, to thank them and welcome our new members. So just to quickly run through, we've got Alan from UCC, Dermot from Queen's, Jessie from UL, Julie from TU Dublin and Lisa from DCU, then Margaret from Trinity and Niall O'Brien in RCSI, Niall, as mentioned, from Galway, and finishing with Susan from UCD. So starting with the strategy then, the strategy is both clear and wide-ranging, but also succinct in the way that it's produced. And Alison did a really good job in, I suppose, establishing how significant the strategy is and the kind of intentions behind it. So in relation to teaching and learning, two kind of aspects to it: to contribute to teaching and learning theory and practice, and the second being to contribute to a national framework on developing lifelong and life-wide competency, skills and knowledge. And I suppose what I would think the challenge for us in teaching and learning is, I think we've done really well on the first. I'm going to speak a bit about that now in terms of how we've contributed to the overall work in the areas of teaching and learning. I think our next challenge is going to be how we, in a sense, widen out what we're doing to not just have it focusing on the activities that we do in teaching and learning environments, in classes we deliver in our own institutions, but the wider, more meaningful impact of the work that we do. And I suppose seeking to collaborate and create linkages with the other Connell groups. And this morning, I think, has been a great first step to that. So looking at what we've done so far, I think probably the most significant piece of work, and something I'm particularly proud of, and it has a long way going back now, is the annual seminar that we hold every year. So that's an opportunity to share the best practice in Ireland and internationally. It allows us to have a conversation around teaching and learning matters, and it's also an opportunity to network and engage with colleagues. And for me, these events have been so successful because they have not just allowed us to have very significant keynote speakers, and we've had some great speakers, but also in each year in different formats, we have used it as an opportunity to have our institutions, our member institutions, share what's happening there. And I think it's always an absolutely excellent way to progress the work we do in our own institutions to a wider audience. And we've always had really good numbers. So pretty much everybody involved in the teaching and learning arena does come to those events. And this year we moved online. And again, there's advantages to that, of course. But I do think the collaboration, the networking piece is going to be important. And we're in the process of considering how we'll deliver our next seminar. Moving ahead then, we've also had the opportunity to contribute to other training opportunities through Connell Teaching and Development opportunities, for example, in 2018, where we proposed an event and helped organise in terms of the effective use of technology to support teaching and learning. And then Arlene has just mentioned last year in November 2020, the joint initiative that the joint event we ran with Connell Research around information literacy and scholarly communications. And for me, this has been really important and something we're looking to build on, because when we have our teaching and learning annual seminar, it's really excellent, but it tends to be people who are already involved in teaching and learning. And the great advantage of the event in November is we were hearing a number of different perspectives from those from the research side and those from the teaching side, and we were kind of meeting and exchanging viewpoints. And I think that's really critical. We instituted a Teaching and Learning Award. We haven't awarded that in a number of years, and we were planning in 2020 to kind of reinvigorate this award, but I think it has been an excellent example of something very tangible. And we were able to do this because we ran the annual seminar every year, so we had some resources to do it. It recognises innovation and excellence in teaching and learning. So the winner receives this funding to offset their costs in relation to their project, and then they report on their work. And this has led to some really interesting work from the previous award winners. And we've also contributed to publications in IL practice, most notably probably a very substantive piece of work from 2011 on integrating information literacy into the curriculum. And I think that was really important in its time. But for me as chair with the committee, I think what we'll be looking to see is how can we continue to have that discussion and advance that discourse, but in a quicker, more responsive way, because obviously something like that is a very time-consuming piece of work, and nearly by the time you've completed it, is there a potential that it's moving a little bit out of date. So moving ahead to the current work programme, and again, that's the theme from the strategic plan. The first area that we feel that we've identified as being an activity we want to follow is to provide representation on Irish open access initiatives related to information literacy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about why that's so critical in a moment. But just as I was asked to give on behalf of the committee our work agenda and I started as chair, we had an opportunity along with some other members of the committee to take part in a collaborative project that's at the inception stage at the moment around what open access means for information literacy. And this project is seeking to draw on different European experience. We've representatives across a lot of the European countries, and we're at the moment scoping out what this will mean in practice. And ultimately, this to me is the way that the Teaching Learning Group can be quite effective, so that we really are leveraging the work that's happening locally and the work that's happening internationally and at a European level, and then making sure that that practice, that knowledge, those projects are disseminated out in a practical way to our institutions and those who are in them. And on that idea, the next piece of work we're focusing on is to develop a toolkit of open accessible resources on best practice in teaching and learning. And again, the idea here is not that this sits outside of what we're doing. There may sometimes be a perception that being part of a Connell group is an additional piece of work, but I'm really keen that we see it as aligning with what we do regularly. So we know that there's excellent work happening, and we're all generally very generous in terms of sharing this work, but we need to do so in a way that is truly openly accessible, as opposed to I've created something and it's open for you to make use of, because that doesn't often translate into what a local institution needs. And then finally, we will continue, as we've been doing, I think, very successfully, our professional development, including our annual seminar. So I'm conscious the time is probably galloping ahead. So I've kind of two more kind of key points to make. And the first is just to go back to the open part of what I was talking about. I think a key driver for us in the coming couple of years is going to be to put open at the centre of teaching and learning practice. We're all involved, I think, in some shape and form through our institutions in the open access conversation. But to me, teaching and learning hasn't been posited as centrally as it might be, and we want to bring it to the conversation. One of the ways is the project I just mentioned, but also we need to look at the approaches we take to content creation and teaching activities, the resources we use, that whether that's online or class material, the practice and pedagogy around how we teach and what informs our teaching, and making sure that all of that is underpinned and put at the centre of the dialogue that's happening nationally and internationally and at all library levels around open access and open OERs. Sometimes the focus does tend to be on OERs, and that's really significant, but then we can lose sight of the access to those resources, the use of those resources, the interpretation and teaching around those resources. And I think that's going to be where the Teaching and Learning Committee wants to put its efforts. And then finally, for me, I think a lot of this has been mentioned by my colleagues, but my vision for how teaching and learning moves ahead is along those themes that we collaborate. I can see I've got 40 seconds, so I'll be quick. We collaborate within our groups, and I think today is a great starting point to this. I've learned a huge amount. I thought I knew what all the groups were doing, and I don't at all as much as I thought. But also we need to be looking outside the Irish partners, not necessarily libraries, not necessarily Connell libraries, but the wider library community and our European partners where we can as well. We need to really align the work that we're doing in our institutions with the themes that we've identified for our work programme, so that they're complementing and adding to it. And when we need to bring this back to the people who aren't on our committees, but who expect kind of to get some value from our role on the committee. The reuse part is not just, taking something that's been created and reusing it. And I know I'm just on 10 minutes, so I'm finishing up now, but that we're also using best practices and different approaches. Even at a very organic stage, if somebody's doing a project, how do they start? How do they plan? How do they put that all together? And to not just reuse the actual output, but reuse and encourage sharing of the processes that underpin it. And then finally, I really hope that Connaught Teaching and Learning, our committee, will be really active in the ways of connectivity. So we want to be making sure that that work that happens at our monthly committee meetings and all the planning that we do around that, that is connecting back with our colleagues who are back in our institutions, and also that we're sharing that experience back out within the higher education dialogue and priorities in the area. And just finally then, to keep in touch with us, we're on Twitter, as I mentioned, thanks to the wonderful new website, and our details are there as well. And I'd be really keen to hear from anybody who's any thoughts on anything I've said today, and that's my own email address to contact me.